Hello, Lux On Demand family. My name is Greg, and I am so excited to welcome you here on YouTube. Typically, we do our services live every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. EST at twitch.tv/Lux Digital Church. We get to chat with you live and talk with you live every week there. But we are also honored that you have joined us here on demand on YouTube. We have a lot of awesome resources and videos that you can check out here on our channel. But right now, I just want to introduce you to the talk that we have and say that I really hope that you enjoy. Thank you for joining us. We love you guys.
Hey, church family, Pastor Mark here, and man, I'm so glad to have you here with us tonight. Thank you for being here and joining us from wherever you are. Thank you to Chino Mage for leading us in a time of prayer tonight. Thank you to David for leading us in a time of worship tonight. And if you guys don't know Chino Mage, his real name is Andy. Andy is one of the staff members here at Lux. He is the director of On Demand Ministries, and we're working with Chino right now towards spending more and more time investing his time and energy and influence here at Lux. Just a really great dude, and it's really cool that I get to serve. Grimdolf, good to see you. Glad to have you here with us. Avery, good to see you. And Melanus, good to see you. Welcome in, Mel. Glad to have you here with us tonight. Thanks for coming to church tonight. Anybody else I haven't got a chance to welcome in, thank you for coming here. I also want to encourage you, Cowboy Tech TV, welcome to church, dude. I also want to encourage you to stick around after service tonight, because one of the things that we're going to be doing in our post-service is I'm going to be bringing in DJ DeMarco, who is one of the missionary partners that we have. We started supporting DJ and Lindsay DeMarco last year, and you may remember us sort of announcing that, but we're actually going to have them live on the stream tonight. I'm going to be talking to DJ about what has happened. So the money that it was invested in them and their ministry, what happened over the course of the past several months as they've been overseas. DJ is going to talk a lot about what they've been doing. He has a few pictures to share with us as well, which we're going to have as part of that, and also just hear a little bit about what God is doing next in their life, and he and Lindsay and their son's life in this next season. So we're really excited to have him. He's already on the call. I can see his face sitting over there. So pretty pumped to have him here with us. Zeph is first time on commands tonight as well, being trained by Yoshi Cake. Thank you, Yoshi. Thank you, Zeph. Appreciate you guys, and thank you everybody for being here. So tonight, if you're here for the very first time, I want to welcome you in. Thank you for being here, making us part of your week. There's a lot of things you could be doing on a Wednesday night, and whether I am, up and live and you're tuned in and paying attention, or if my voice is in the background of some Destiny 2 gameplay, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm just glad that you're here. Thank you for stopping by and making us a part of your week, investing in your spiritual journey and being here with us. Whenever you feel ready, I want to encourage you, take a next step with us. I know it's not easy, but say hello in the chat. We just want to welcome you. Drop a follow here on the stream. We just want to send you a DM on Twitch tomorrow, inviting you to come and join us in Discord. Come be part of our family, which is where we are every day, 24/7, week in, week out. That's where we are, and so we'd love to have you come and join us there. If you're part of our on-demand family, I know that my mother-in-law is live with us tonight. She's usually part of our on-demand family. If you're part of our on-demand family, thank you for being part of our church. We love you. We appreciate you, but please come and join us on Discord. Come and become part of our family. Church is not just spectation, it's also participation. We want you to come and participate. You got to build community here. You got to make friends here. You got to grow spiritually here, and I'm glad that you're tuning in and listening to our sermons, but we want you to take the next step with us. I implore you, ask you, come and join our community. Come and join our church that's scattered all across the globe. We're so glad to have you here with us tonight. Tonight, we're in part 2 of a 4-week collection of talks called Ghosts. Now, it's themed around Halloween, but Ghosts is literally representing sort of the pain and the trauma that has come up in our past and it is current in our life. Some of those things can kind of haunt us. They can come into our lives and continue to be part of them well after those events are over. And so we've been talking about, how does God actually use pain? And does God actually use pain, or is it just sort of random? We believe in an all-powerful and an all-loving God, and those things oftentimes seem like they can't work together. How can good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? To be honest with you guys, a lot of this stuff is like near and dear on my heart right now. Some of you know, we've been dealing with some health concerns with our youngest daughter this week, and the pain of that situation is very, 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 very real to me today. I'm going to be honest with you, like, I didn't know how I was going to preach a message on this subject. I didn't know how we were going to get into this conversation tonight. But I'm really glad that I'm here, and we've been praying for strength and that God would provide everything that we need. The truth of the matter is that pain in our lives, specifically physical pain, is actually oftentimes kind of a good thing. And we don't typically think about it that way, but let me just give you a couple of thoughts. Pain, physically, pain enables us to learn. We grow from experiencing pain, something that we don't want to experience, something we typically see as negative or not healthy for us. But pain oftentimes enables us to augment or change our behavior. I have two little girls. I have my oldest daughter is Brooklyn. My youngest daughter is Aria, and Aria is the one that we were praying for tonight. Brooklyn is a very cautious child. She's very careful. She's very intentional with the steps that she takes. She doesn't do anything too reckless. And my youngest is very much the opposite of that. She sort of, flings herself off of things and will throw herself at you. And so the other day I walked in and my daughter literally yeeted herself off of our couch over our ottoman and launched her entire body at our oak coffee stand, our oak TV stand. And she tumbled forward, and I thought she was going to just absolutely crush her face off this oak TV stand. But sort of, Victory in Jesus, good to see you, welcome to church. But then at the last moment, she sort of adjusted and she hit her arm off of it, and she's crying because her arm hurts. She's crying because her arm hurts. But there was a moment in which my daughter learned something valuable. She learned that she didn't want to throw her body at that velocity off of the couch towards the oak TV stand anymore. That small amount of pain augmented her behavior so that she wouldn't then launch herself full send into it and crack her head or her face or a more precious part and a more easily injured part of her body on the TV stand. And so I could have caught her, like as a dad. Could have I maybe dove for her? Could have I maybe launched myself out of it? If I had been in a slightly different position, maybe. But then there would have been a valuable lesson that was taught by pain that she wouldn't have had the chance to learn. She would have continued to launch herself off, and what would have been originally as dangerous would have become a game, and she would have kept launching herself off of the couch towards Dad until Dad didn't catch her, or until Dad wasn't there, or until there was a slip, or both kids jumped at me at the same time, and then one of them would have suffered catastrophically more damage because of the lack of restraint that was shown in them whenever they launched themselves towards the oak TV stand. Pain has a way of doing this in our life. It serves as guardrails and behavior augment. So, for example, most people will never make a change to their life unless one of two things happens: unless they want to change, or unless pain causes them to change. And there's very, very, very few people in the world who want to change. Most of us are status quo keepers. And even if we like change, like me, I don't mind the style of my hair changing or my beard growing out or whatever. But there are some things in life that I desperately want to remain the same. And I won't voluntarily change those things. It has to be painful. Something has to, the pain has to override the comfort. There has to be something that causes me to need to change. Very similar to if you extended your hand towards an open flame, the pain that you would experience on your hand would cause you to change your behavior because you would recognize that it's better to have a burnt hand and to draw back than it is to have my entire body engulfed in flame. You see, here at Lux, one of the things that we've been talking about throughout this series, and it's our key statement for this series, is simply this: pain has purpose. And it's not always easy to see what that purpose is. In fact, sometimes it's very difficult to see why God is allowing pain to be part of our story or part of our life. Or better yet, why would God allow pain to be part of the story of somebody that we love? I'm actually going to be talking about that really thoroughly in 2 weeks. Next week, Chino Mage is going to be bringing a sermon talking about how faith can humble, or how pain can humble us and draw us back to God. I'm going to be talking the week after that about when there is no explanation. What happens when pain seems to just be pain? But tonight we're talking about how pain can impact our lives in a way that it can redirect us. Our hand could be extending towards the fire and can then draw back from the fire. Our body could be launching towards the oak TV stand, and then we can decide that maybe we want to launch our body off the couch in a slightly different direction because we don't want to end up colliding with our head or our face to the oak TV stand. That pain is a teacher, it's a coach, it's a guide. Pain is there to teach us lessons. Now, we realize this in our physical lives. Like, we understand understand that pain is important. It's inconvenient, but it's important, and we understand its value. Ethan Phillips, good to see you. Welcome in to church. I'm new here. Go by he, they. Call me Ethan, Graham, Phillips, whichever is fine. Ethan, glad to have you. Welcome to church. So glad to have you here with us. My name is Mark, and I'm the pastor here at Lux Digital Church. Glad to have you here with us tonight. And so what I was talking, I'm going to lose my space in what I was talking about because I'm trying to read chat and also do that at the same time. Let me take a drink of water really quick. Beautiful. Beautiful. And so we understand that pain has the ability to redirect our lives when it's physical, right? If our knee hurts, we understand that maybe we need to take care of it a little bit better. Maybe we need to put a knee brace on. Maybe we need to go see a doctor. We understand that physical pain represents things, but what we don't love is whenever there's spiritual pain or whenever there is emotional pain or when there's relational pain. Those sorts of pains we typically try to avoid. In fact, most of life, at least from an American worldview, is often more about pain avoidance than it is about anything else. We just don't want to experience any pain. We never allow pain to do anything positive in our lives because we're trying to sedate it and avoid it and flee from it. So last week we talked about how God can and oftentimes does use pain to form us. Tonight we're going to talk about how God can and does use pain to redirect us. And to be fair, this week I'm going to be talking a decent amount about self-inflicted pain. I'm going to share a little bit of my story about a time in my life that self-inflicted pain caused me to change directions and redirect my life. But last week we talked about pain that's outside of your intentions, pain that you didn't cause yourself, pain that seemed random and out of control, and how God can repurpose that and use it to form us. So if you missed it, go back and watch last week's message. It's already on YouTube and it's on podcast. Tonight, one of the guides for our story about how pain can redirect our lives and change our course is going to be an Old Testament prophet named Jonah. Now, it's likely that some of you already know Jonah here. You maybe grew up in Sunday school like I did, or maybe you didn't, but you still know the name Jonah, and so you're familiar with it. Jonah and the whale, perhaps you're familiar with that story. Maybe you flip through a book or it was painted. Well, it's one of the more disturbing stories in the Bible, but it is one of the stories that we most frequently tell our children. We tell our children the story of Noah on the ark. We leave in the part about all the animals saved, and we do not include the part of all of the rest of the people drowning. And then we tell the story of Jonah, and we include the part of him getting swallowed by the fish, but we don't include the part of him wanting an entire city of people to burn in fire. And so we sort of go, sometimes we don't tell all of the story whenever we're in Sunday school, but we're going to talk a little bit about the story of Jonah and the whale tonight, or Jonah and probably the very large fish. Now, I'm not going to get into practically was there a real Jonah and was there a real fish and did Jonah get swallowed. We're not going to get into all of that because it's not our purpose. It's a worthy conversation and one that we may have in the future, but tonight, for the purposes of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be looking at Jonah's life and a specific story in Jonah's life as an overarching narrative that will show us how God sometimes allows pain to play out in our lives. Jonah was a prophet, meaning he was a voice piece for God. Typically, we view prophets as someone who predicted the future, and they did do that sometimes, but more often, prophets were people who called God's people back to God. They were people who called out the sin of God's people and brought them back to righteousness and relationship with God, more than they were people who predicted the future. And that was exactly Jonah's rule. Evidently, God had used Jonah in the past because he comes back to him and says, I want you to go to the land of Nineveh, to the city of Nineveh, and I want you to preach to the people there that if they do not turn away from their sinful way of life and their destructive behaviors, that I, God, will destroy their city and everybody the city contains. Now, Jonah was a racist and a prejudiced, and he hated the Ninevites. In fact, he hated them so much that he actively wanted to see the judgment of God fall down on them. And he knew that if he went and preached and the Ninevites responded and they humbled themselves and returned to God, that God would show mercy. But Jonah did not desire mercy for the Ninevites. He desired punishment for them. And so instead of receiving that word and getting on a boat and sailing to Nineveh, he got on a boat and he sailed south instead of north in the opposite direction of Nineveh. And when he was sailing, a great storm blew up on the ocean that was conjured by God to the point that the boat was being swamped and the seasoned sailors believed that they were going to drown. And we pick up the story in Jonah chapter 1. It says this, Then the sailors said to each other, Come, let us cast lots and find out who is responsible for this calamity. They cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. So they asked him, Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? He answered, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. This terrified them, and they asked him, what have you done? For they knew that he had been running from the Lord because he had already told them so, but they let him on the boat anyway. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? Jonah says, pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased. Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard into the raging sea, and the sea grew calm. And the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Whether intentional or unintentional, there are going to be times in seasons of life that you enter into a storm. Earlier this week, my family and I entered into one, and my wife and I feel very similar to Jonah at the moment, to the crew that looked and they didn't necessarily see a hopeful way out. They didn't see an easy ray of light. And in times in life, there's going to be storms. And either you're in a storm right now, or you're coming out of a storm, or perhaps there's a storm on the horizon and you have a brief respite on calm seas. The reality is that storms come in every one of our lives. And it isn't what people would want you to believe. In fact, if you look at social media, you'll see people who primarily are traveling and riding skateboards really well and jumping motorcycles. And if you're on the church's Instagram feed, because I'm one of the only ones on it, you'll also see super sick PC setups. And it just really looks like everyone is living their best life except for you. And it's incredibly isolating and totally disorienting. And we tend to sort of think that our lives are the only lives that's experiencing a storm. And so not only are we in the storm, but we're also incredibly isolated. And Jonah's in the situation where he feels like he's in the center of the storm. But it's really interesting here because there's no point. Jonah does not turn to the people in the boat and say, I'm supposed to be in Nineveh right now. You can save me and you can save yourselves by turning the boat around and going to Nineveh. The truth is, I think that Jonah would rather have died than save the Ninevites. In his brain, at least, the one small thing that he could grab at the end of his life as he drowned in the sea was that his death also meant death for the people of Nineveh. And so Jonah says to the ship sailors, the crew, the captain, he says, just take me and throw me overboard. So there's times in our lives. There's times in our lives when there's a storm that comes up, and it's God telling us, it's time to turn around. You've run from me long enough. This is the consequences for the decisions that you've made. I've told you that your life was to go this way, and instead you've gotten up on the boat and you've gone in the exact opposite direction, and now you've found yourself in this fierce storm, and it's time to turn around. And there are some times in life where, despite the fact that we're experiencing pain, we can't turn the boat around. And in those times, sometimes we just need to jump overboard. There are times in life for our life to be redirected and to break free from the storm. Listen, for Jonah, God was in the storm, God was in the waves, and God was below the water. And although everything seemed desperate, God conjured the storm, and God was in the fish in the water below. And so when Jonah was thrown overboard, instead of drowning, which he imagined he would do, the Bible teaches us that he was swallowed by a large fish, which carried him for 3 days and 3 nights and then spat him back out on land. Listen, in our lives, there's sometimes storms and painful things that we go through, and we want to just, listen, we want freedom from it. We want God just to sweep in and pull us out of it. We're looking in the storm, but God, I don't see you, because sometimes we don't recognize that God is the storm. God is in the storm. There's times in life where God not only allows, I don't believe that God orchestrates our tragedies, but I do believe that God does not waste any part of our life. That's what this whole series is about, and which is why we shouldn't waste any season or any part of it either. There's times when we flee and run from God, that God allows the pain in our circumstances and the randomness in our life to turn our attention away from the destination we were set upon and return it to God. Because there's times in our life when we run from Him. For me in college, there was a couple of years where I had turned and run from God. I was fleeing from Him, and I found myself in about my junior year of college in a place where I had kind of just made a mess of my life. I was dealing with a lot of storms. I felt a little bit hopeless, and it was in that moment that I decided to abandon ship and turn back to my Father. And it was in that place that God met me. Because God used the storms that were in my life to redirect me. So I don't know what storms you're facing right now. I don't know what problems you have. I'm not sure what obstacles there are. But usually if we're in the middle of a storm, and we have some aspect of our life or the whole of our life that's been running from our Father, we know. We know exactly what it is. But sometimes we've built so much of our life on it that we don't know how to turn the boat around. That there's sometimes where we can turn the ship around, but there's often times where we're so caught up in the pain of the storm. We've built so much of our life sending it in this trajectory. All of our friends are on board with us, and they're all sailing in the same way. They're not about to turn the ship around with us. We've built the ship to head in this direction, and the wind is heading that way. We simply can't turn it around. And there's times in life when we have to abandon ship. And we have to trust that God will take care of us. Now, when Jonah jumped off the boat, I don't know if Jonah thought that God was going to swallow him with a fish, but I bet when he did, he didn't think of it as deliverance at the time. I think there's people in here right now. I think there's people in the chat that really do need to hear this, because you've been going through a storm and you've abandoned ship, but you don't feel like you've been spat out on the land yet. You feel like you've gone from I'm in the middle of a storm to I'm going to drown to now I'm going to be slowly digested by a fish like Boba Fett in the Sarlacc pit. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that Jonah recognized being in the belly of the fish as deliverance. I don't think he went from there. I think he saw it as punishment. I mean, maybe God had swallowed him up. I'm sure there was at least a moment where he's like, I'm never getting out of here. I'm going to die being slowly digested by a fish. Listen, there's times when we have steered in the wrong direction so hard and so long that God's deliverance for us doesn't feel like deliverance yet. There's time when deliverance still feels painful. It can still hurt a bit. It can still feel a little bit desperate. It can still feel a little bit dark. There's times when God has swallowed us up and He has us and He's protecting us and He's taking us towards shore, but it just feels like we're still forgotten, still lost, still below the waters, still without hope. Sometimes God's deliverance for our life, when we turn our lives away from the direction we were going and back towards the direction that God is sending us, sometimes that deliverance doesn't always feel like deliverance at the time. And I want to speak to another group here tonight who maybe, just maybe, this isn't really a thing where you can say, well, I've done this or I've done that and I've run from God, and so therefore I find myself in this storm in my life. It's not self-inflicted. You just find yourself in a storm. Now, through the other things that we're going to talk about, how God can humble us, how God can form us, and how God can do something else we're going to talk about in the last week of the series, there are some times that storms of life blow in that are outside of our control, that are totally unpredictable, that we really can't do anything about, and God uses them for different purposes than redirecting us. But there are times when we have the best of intentions, when we believe we're serving God, when we believe we're going in the direction that He wants us to go with our lives, but we're not. We've missed something, and God uses the storms and the pains in life to capture our attention and to redirect us. Dusty Disciple, good to see you. Welcome back to church. Glad to have you here with us. There's times that God captures us and He redirects us. And this is why it's so vitally important for you and I to have solid relationships. Johnny Rage, thanks for the sub. Appreciate you. This is why it's so important for us to have relationships. This is why it's important for us to be plugged into a small group. This is why it's important for us to have spiritual mentors. Because there's times in life that pain is going to come up, and you're going to need people around you that can say, is this a test? Am I being formed for what's on the other side of the storm? Because there's times that we sail into the storm and God uses the storm to form and refine us like a crucible, and He prepares us for what's next. But there's times when there's nothing on the other side of the storm because the storm was intended to redirect us. And the worst thing that can happen is us to go through the storm and on the other side of the storm realize that we've lost our bearings and don't know who we are or where we are anymore. Because we shot off in the wrong direction. We had the best of intentions. We thought we were following God's plan for our life, but He had something different, but we never took time to listen. This is why it's so important to have good people in our lives who are outside of our context, who can look in and they can say, I think that God might be changing the direction for you right now. You know, before I came and started Lux, I was serving a church, and I served that church for 11 years. And in the last couple of years of my time there were some experiences that were rather painful. But they weren't the worst. I wasn't in a trauma, but there was a storm. And at the time, I thought it was something that God just desired for me to push through. And it took a couple of years of living in that to realize that God wasn't just asking me to push through. He was asking me to turn the boat around. He was directing me towards something new. And God allowed the storm in that season of my life, that pain, instead of asking me to stay the course, He asked me to change directions. Because God will use pain in our life to redirect us. Now, after Jonah had been spat out on land, the Bible comes and tells us this, because God isn't done with him. After the deliverance of the fish that didn't feel like deliverance, He spit him out. And we see here, He says this, Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I gave you. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Now Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. And the Ninevites believed God. A fast was proclaimed, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. Then Jonah's warning reached the king of Nineveh, and he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself in sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation that he issued in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people or animals, herds or flocks taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from His fierce anger, so that all will not perish. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, He relented and did not bring on them the destruction that He had threatened. Jonah turns around and God still sends him back to the people of Nineveh. He preaches, the people repent, and the city is saved. And the book of Jonah ends mostly with Jonah complaining and God allowing pain to continue to teach Jonah lessons he has yet to learn. Pain is one of the greatest teachers in our life. And I'm not sure where you are today. I'm not sure if you're in the greatest storm of your life. But I can tell you now, if you quit fleeing from it and start turning your heart towards God, if you start tuning your ear towards Him, He can use it to not only form you, but to redirect you into the next season of your life, to the next waters that you're supposed to sail. When you look back on your life, it won't simply be the good times that you remember. It will be the difficult ones that you're thankful for. Our Father is an amazing storyteller. He tells epic stories. And he desires to tell an epic story through your life. But no one's ever made a movie about a person who spent their life trying to save up for a Range Rover, and then in the end, they bought a Range Rover. People don't tell stories about people who've had nothing but easy lives. They tell stories of people who've persevered through adversity. God has a beautiful narrative to tell in your life, but that narrative involves conflict and pain, redirection. Don't shy away from the story. God has something beautiful he wants to tell through your life. It'll not just glorify him, but he knows it was built to fulfill you. And when you look back on the story and the narrative that God has told, if you've chosen to not escape it, if you've chosen to embrace it, if you've chosen not to get bitter, but instead to be thankful, God can tell something beautiful through even the darkest moments and the most fierce storms that you experience. Our Father is a grand storyteller, and he has a beautiful story to tell through your life. I don't honestly know what's going on in every person's life who's here in chat. I know that many of you are going through storms right now. I know in our family, we're going through a little one. We're praying it's not bigger. But I know that God wants to tell his story through your life. And if he wants to tell his story, he may need to redirect you towards the most epic pieces, towards the most fulfilling parts, towards the most beautiful sunrises, towards the most epic seas. He may be turning you from the course that you're on right now. Follow him without fear, because there's a Father who loves you, who genuinely does have what's best for you at heart, who knows where you need to be to fit into the grander plan and story that he's telling. And if you listen, he'll allow the painful situations and the storms that we face to redirect us and get us back on course, sailing towards him, his plan for our life, and the story that he wants to tell, the story that we get to be a part of. Which is why our next step this week is this. I will allow God to redirect my life this week. I will allow God to redirect my life this week. I'm not sure what parts of your life need redirecting. Some of you may be able to make a course correction this week. You may just be able to turn the wheel. You may be able to set the sails a bit differently. You may be able to refocus. You may be able to cut something out or add something new. You may be able to quit something or start something. You may be able to rekindle a relationship or call a counselor. Some of you, though, you might need to abandon ship. You might need to let it sail on without you. You might need to trust the fact that there is a God not only in the storm and in the fury, but there's a God who's in the peace of the deeps. And he loves you the same in the storm as he does below the surface. Allow him and trust him to redirect and take your life on new paths. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for tonight, and I thank you for this group. I thank you for the 60 souls, 62 souls that are in here with us, and those who've stopped by for only a moment. I hope that a seed was planted and that your word was heard. I pray for those of us here today who need to give away and abandon our cynicism, for those who need to abandon their judgmental hearts, for those who need to abandon and let go of their bitterness, for those who need to forgive, for those who need to let go, For those who need to walk away from friends and relationships and environments that continue to force them into a place of addiction. For those who need to let go of clans and guilds and games so that they can reclaim a portion of their time and refocus their life on you and on their family. For those of us who are here tonight who need to be redirected, would you use the storms of our life to turn us around and put us back on course? I love you, Lord. I thank you. In your name we pray. Amen.